Welcome to the Interprofessional Space podcast, where the spirit of inquiry meets healthcare collaboration. In our podcast, we discuss all things interprofessional education. According to the World Health Organization, interprofessional education, or IPE, is when students from at least two healthcare professions learn about, from, and with each other to improve health outcomes and enable effective collaboration. Welcome back to the iSpace podcast. In this episode, Suzy and I continue our conversation with Emma. And today we're diving into the International Interprofessional Education event that the three of us collaborated on, focusing on caring for someone who has throat cancer. We'll explore the importance of the interprofessional collaboration in care and hear firsthand from a patient and their spouse about their journey through treatment. Stay tuned for an insightful and heartfelt discussion. So in February of 2025, this year, the three of us collaborated on an international IPE event. And we would love, Suzy and I would love to talk through this with you because in part, it was a lot of fun. And I think it was meaningful learning for the students, certainly the students I've spoken with. But it's also something that I think could be easily replicated or adapted and run by others. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Emma?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. So in February, as Anne said, the three of us collaborated on an online interprofessional opportunity for our students around the concept of head and neck cancer. So what we did was we came together, we thought about what it was that we wanted to create, and we very much had the mindset, I think it was a collaborative mindset, that it would be lovely if we could get the patient's voice heard, and alongside that, the carer's voice as well, because oftentimes when we're looking at these sorts of things, we can put up some videos or we can share our experiences as practitioners, but it becomes more meaningful for our students, particularly when they hear from the patients themselves. So we wanted to structure something around the experiences of a patient. So we were able to facilitate a patient and her husband come and have a chat to us about their experiences of being diagnosed and being treated for head and neck cancer. But we also wanted to get the students to think about the differences in how this might be approached across the different countries, but also, were there any examples out there of good team collaboration around the management and the care, really, of our head and neck cancer patients? And so we were really lucky in that we were able to bring an expert in who had set up just that sort of collaborative clinic where with therapeutic radiographers, OTs, dietitians, speech and language therapists, anybody that the patient might need some advice or some support from were in one place. So it was kind of a one-stop shop for our patients. So we had, can I mention her name? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had Dr. Jane Mafflin come in and have a chat as part of this day as well, or this half day, and it was a lot of fun. I think the feedback I've had from our students was incredibly positive. They drew so much from this, from the experience, and yeah, it was thought-provoking, I would say, as we went through the day.
Absolutely. And I love that you pointed out, use the word care. I think you used that very deliberately, because some of the most profound memories that I have from that session were hearing about the collaboration in care, but the individual efforts made by folks to care for the patient and the carer of that patient. Things that were not typically, they wouldn't show up in a job description, but the caring for that person as a human being, I think was a huge takeaway for me. And I know for many of the students from MCHP who attended.
Yeah. I think it was also really nice to hear what a positive experience they had, and that
Yeah.
they felt really looked after and really cared for, both the patient and her husband, and having experienced that. And I loved it. I thought that was just really nice, and the students did too. I think that we focus a lot on what's gone wrong, what we need to fix. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
and those are important lessons. That's
Mm.
not to take away from that, but it was also really nice to hear such a great story, like learning about how well teams work together, and how um,
And I
successful that
think
was. Yeah.
I think that's one of the main things that, as kind of practitioners of IPE, that's what we want, that's what we strive to get across, isn't it? Is that we're building all of these skills so that when you go out into practice, actually, when you're on the ground, it might feel that this isn't happening at all. But from a patient's perspective, they see this amalgamation, this one, everybody knows, and they can go to person X and they will give them the same advice as person Y. So they're not getting cross population of care issues, or they're not getting different advice from different professionals. It's all amalgamated together. And, teams are difficult. Teams are really, really difficult to work with, but it's about how we can, how we develop skills to be able to manage the difficulties while still being able to be part of that team and provide that care for our patients moving forward.
So I don't quite know how to get into this. Emma, do you want to? Our guest speakers for that session, our patient and carer who so graciously shared their experiences, had a connection with you. Have a connection with you. Do you want to share with our listeners who they
Yeah,
were? Are who they are?
So the patient and her husband who joined us that day are actually my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. And as a family, we have been going through the ups and downs of head and neck cancer for the last year. So my mother-in-law was diagnosed round about this time in 2024. And this was just about her experience. And when I first broached the subject, following our initial discussions, she was actually really, really enthusiastic. She genuinely wanted not so much to have her story heard, but she wanted to be able to share her experiences with students so that they kind of understood some of the things that might be happening. But I think in general terms, she had such a positive experience, which might not always be the experience of all of our patients. But actually, sometimes it's nice for us to hear those positive experiences as well. So she wanted to share that with our students. Equally, then, go on.
So
Sorry,
I
Susie.
don't. What it brought up for me though was we had a question from a student, because she said during her treatment she had students in
Yeah.
as well, and one of the students said, is this a problem for you? Like, was it hard to have students there? But her mindset was very much about it was giving back and it was
Mm,
teaching, and that was and I just thought that was such a brilliant way of looking at it. And it really, the students learned so much, and for them being so open and so honest, and put in a kind of vulnerable
mm,
position. And we do ask a lot of that. I think when we bring in people, especially patients, a lot of times as facilitators or as people putting activities together, we reach out to people that we know
mm.
for some of this. Um, and what was that like? Because you also brought in your father-in-law, who, yeah,
Yeah, um, it was interesting, and it threw up things that I never really anticipated. I knew it could happen, but I wasn't anticipating that it would happen. So I kind of preempted some of it. So I had my in-laws in the same. So we did the session online. So I was at home and I had my in-laws at home with me. They were in another room. But actually, some of the things that my mother-in-law was talking about, and they were things that we've talked about lots and lots of times and haven't really sparked any emotion, got quite emotional for my mother-in-law. So it was really nice to be able to be that, again, that support person, that link person. So I was able to go into the room with her and just sit with her while while she shared. And we spoke afterwards, and I was trying to say, are you okay? Were you expecting that? And she literally said she doesn't know why she felt emotional at that point. She's never felt emotional when she's discussed it previously. But we're making an effort now to kind of talk through those things more and more often so that she's starting to make sense of them as well. So it was good from that point of view. Good is probably not the right word, but it was helpful for me from that point of view, because I get a typical patient response when I say to her, how are you today? Or how are things? It's always, I'm okay, everything's fine, I'm good. But it just made me realize that maybe things are not okay, and we might be at a point in her kind of recovery now where we can start to talk about things like support and support groups and those sorts of things that she's been a little bit resistant to prior to this. So it's about that. So it was enlightening for me to actually see that more, because she's been so stoic through it all. She's been really stoic, and nothing is phasing her. But actually it was nice to see that she is vulnerable, and yeah, and she was just really pleased to have been able to do it. And hearing the story from my father-in-law's perspective was quite enlightening as well. We do have lots and lots of late night chats, just me and him, where we talk things through. And I get the, what should we be doing now? What do I need to do for this? What do I need to do for that? Because he doesn't want to upset his wife either. So it's kind of a strange dynamic, but it was nice to have them together, and actually to see the support that they offered each other when they were talking as well. Yeah, so it was
It really brought to light how important it was to have a good support system and network when you're going through it, because you could see the way they were and then see how you stepped in and how much they looked to you as well, and really appreciated what you've done and how you've been able to be with them throughout the whole journey that they've been on. It was just really lovely. But yeah, but also you think people that don't have that are really, yeah.
And I think that's what came out from some of the feedback that I've had from our students who took part in it, was actually they now recognise that maybe they should be asking that "how are you" question to the family member sat in the waiting room just as much as they're asking the patient, because they might not be managing what the expectations that have fallen on them during this process. I think what's quite interesting for me was I met up with my in-laws at the weekend, actually, and we were just having a chat, and I'm not even sure how we came round to talking about the event and what we'd done, and my father-in-law looked quite nervous, actually quite anxious, and I'm not used to seeing him in that kind of way, but he was concerned that they hadn't given enough, that they hadn't been able to express themselves well enough. And I'm going, no, that's not how it was at all. It was absolutely brilliant. This is some of the feedback that we've had back. And you made, your story almost made more of an impact than my mother-in-law's patient story, because we often forget about the carers. And so they were quite taken aback to have heard some of the feedback that I was able to share with them as well. So they were quite pleased. And the advice that came out was, if we can do it again, we can do better. And I'm going, no,
oh my goodness,
do better.
oh my goodness,
don't do better, but yes to doing it again.
yeah. One of the takeaways for me as a facilitator of IPE, and Suzy mentioned this, I will pull my family in to participate in whatever way fits, but I've never had them do it I've had them pretend to be a patient, but never as someone who's going through something. And so working with your lovely mother and father-in-law was such a blessing, but it makes me think or wonder, what's the follow-up after? Do we, we have this great session, we have the patient voice, and this time the carer voice, which is very powerful. And then, we go on our way, they go on their way. And it occurs to me that maybe those individuals could use some support, or maybe I should be circling back at some point and just thanking them again and seeing how they're doing, because it sounds like your in-laws continue to process that experience and to think about it and to have feelings about it. So I think a big takeaway for me is to start the practice of circling back to my patient voice and whomever I have in that role, and to just do a check-in with them and maybe offer some support.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, but it kind of mirrors practice in many ways, doesn't it? So, whether we're thinking about practice as an individual professional practice from an IPE perspective, quite often a patient will leave this point in their journey and we might never actually see them or get back in touch with them again. So maybe that's where our collaborative networks and our collaborative kind of practice in a practical way will come in, because they may no longer be with us as a profession, but they might still be in touch with some of the work that that collaborative colleagues, and just getting that feedback and that check-in can be really important, can't it? I mean, we're quite lucky in that within the support system that Dr. Mathlin set up, once our radiotherapy patients have finished their head and neck cancer treatment and they're no longer under, the hospital where the cancer treatment is delivered, they can still ring up that team at any point. If they're worried or concerned or there's anything going on, they can still ring up and have that. And I think in some ways it was nice to be able to do that collective going back and having a chat with my in-laws and seeing where they were, and actually being able to consolidate that no, actually it was really powerful, and they maybe didn't feel that powerfulness in what they were saying, but actually the impact has been really powerful. And they've gone off on a lovely holiday to Cyprus now, so they're very happy.
Cyprus. So we have some general questions just about IPE in general. And I think you've hit on some of this, but the first question is, what skills do healthcare leaders need to support the growth and sustainability of IPE? And it sounds, so discussion in Wales, I'm learning after today's interview, it's a little different in Wales, but still those leaders need certain skills. What would you suggest?
I think you have to be, it's not embedded, but you have to be embedded in that vision of interprofessional education. So you have to believe in interprofessional education, because if you don't believe and your facilitators don't believe, you're not going to be able to bring your students along on that IPE journey with you. So you really have to believe in IPE, and that means that you have to change your mindset. You have to be open to creating that interprofessional identity and sustaining that interprofessional identity and growing it as part of who you are. It always helps if you are approaching things with enthusiasm. And also that ability, I think, to see outside the box, to, be willing to push some of the boundaries that are out there in terms of IPE, to say, well, it doesn't have to be that rigid. We can do this, this, and this, and it still fits within this sphere, and we can still make this a really good day, or we can still make this a really good session. Yeah, so I would say they are some of the core skills. I think you have to have a very thick skin, is what we would say here, in that, you have to be able to sustain and take a lot of knockbacks as you're trying to develop your IPE strategy and your IPE structure. You have to be willing to put your head above that parapet and to start, having a voice that says, no, actually, this is really important and we want this. And in order for this to work, we need, or I need this. And I think that's really difficult for some of us, particularly as healthcare practitioners, because we're not always very good at doing that from a professional point of view. So yeah, being brave, I think, is a good thing when we start thinking about the skills that we need to be able to push the IPE agenda forward.
Yeah. So speaking about pushing the agenda forward, where do you
Great transition.
Yeah. So we've got, next 5 to 10 years, what do you think about interprofessional education? Where are we going? I mean, I know in many ways I feel like Wales is so far ahead because of the like kind of the mandate now that's been given, but I guess in Wales or across the UK or internationally.
So I think in Wales, it's going to be interesting because I think we're going to need those 5 or 10 years to actually see if there's been a difference. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of miss out when we think about IPE. We're brilliant in an academic structure, thinking about, how do we structure it? What do we want to achieve? But then we may be not so good about following up. So it'd be here in Wales, it's going to be interesting to have those cohorts of students who have had a mandated quite a large proportion of their curricula, really, when we think about 20%, to see how they are pushing that when they become practitioners. So being able to have that longitudinal viewpoint, that's one of the projects that we're starting now here in Wales, alongside HEIW again, is looking at those longitudinal studies. So yeah, okay, you said this, but has it actually had an impact? I think across the UK, IPE is sort of gaining a lot of momentum again. I always feel that when you're in the IPE game, you're often on a climb up the mountain or a descent down the mountain. It seems very roller coastery. There's never a nice plateau you can sit on for a while. But I also in the UK there's definitely momentum around IPE and where interprofessional education should be going. There's a lot more buy-in, not just from higher education institutions, but actually those external kind of organisations that have a say in how we educate our practitioners. And I think it's that voice that is going to have the impact over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's going to become a must-have, I would say, rather than a nice-to-have. I always look at some of the stuff. I know you've had Anthony Breitbach on the podcast previously, and I look at some of the stuff that he's doing over in America, and I'm thinking, wow, I would just like that room to be able to put all of my students in. That's the first thing. But
Nice.
to be able to maybe garner that momentum as well, and there certainly seems to be a lot more coming out in kind of literature and things from the Americas around how they are now bringing that into a practical setting. And so I think it will be interesting over the next 5 to 10 years to see where that shift comes from and to see if we can shift the mindset within a clinical environment. Certainly in the UK, where it's kind of very much structured under the NHS system, where you can't make changes because you've got to turn the Titanic around 360 first. So it would be interesting to see whether our guys who are coming in at grassroots level can start to make those changes. But I certainly feel an uplift and a momentum in IPE at the moment, across the world, globally, I would say.
Wonderful. So you alluded to this in an earlier comment. I'm wondering if you have strategies to recommend to help IPE facilitators and leaders to sort of inspire or lead individuals who maybe are not fully in support or don't fully understand IPE. Because my experience has been when someone really understands what IPE is, there's automatic support. So when we have some reluctance, do you have any ideas for managing that?
I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's such a big question. I suppose we, as an IPE community, one of the things that we can do is actually start shouting about the great stuff that we're doing more. And I think, things like this podcast are an incredible way of being able to share global perspectives on IPE and how things are done differently in different places, but also then sharing that with the staff that we're working with. Thinking more about our staff, we put so much effort into creating IPE opportunities for our students that are really well constructed, really well thought through, and actually maybe it's about taking that step back and going, well, actually I need to bring my faculty members along with me in this to be able to generate and to do that. So it's almost about educating the educators. So, telling our stories, giving examples, getting them involved maybe in IPE in a way that they don't have to maybe be the facilitators. So we run whenever we can, not that we can do it very often, but where we can, we kind of we try and tag team our facilitators. So we'll try and put 2 facilitators into a room with our cohorts, so that they can bounce off each other, but actually if you've got somebody that has never been a facilitator before, they can start to learn those ropes, they can start to see things, and we find that that's quite helpful in terms of giving them that confidence to say, actually, it's okay, I don't need to know the answers to all of these questions. And I always think, as a facilitator of IPE, one of my key roles is, maybe not to know those answers, but to be able to poke the bear in some ways, and to play that devil's advocate, and to ask those difficult questions that they're skirting around the kind of sidelines of. And that's a skill that you develop and you learn, and you can only really do that by seeing the role models. So I think we've got to get better at seeing ourselves as those role models, and putting ourselves out there, and being open to, people agreeing or disagreeing. But I think it's about building a network within your own faculty of people who understand and who want to be part of it. I think it becomes very, very difficult when we are trying to train facilitators who actually don't want to be part of IPE at all. And so, for some of our staff, we're never going to change their mindset. So actually it's easier to, or, it could be more beneficial if we don't try and force them into it, because that just reinforces their negative perspective, which then rubs off on our students. I also think that we have to change the mindset in practice. I would say particularly here in the UK, maybe, because that's my experience. There's a kind of a myth that IPE happens naturally in practice. It happens all the time. We're doing it already, and that's not the reality. What they're actually doing is, working alongside, but never actually talking or collaborating or integrating with anybody else. So I think we have to start putting a structure in place where we can support that change within practice as well. Because, as a healthcare practitioner myself, change is a really unsettling place to be. And to have, some young upstart coming in telling you that that actually what you should be doing is this, and this would work much better, possibly isn't going to be received very well. So how do we work with our clinical partners to develop that mindset throughout their kind of practice as well? Will it work? I don't know, but we've got to start somewhere, I think, in facilitating this.
And so if people want to do that, okay. So and they're like, yes, I want to do this. I want to be more involved. I think this is the way to go. This is the future. We need to be doing this. What can people do to get involved with kind of the wider IPE community? Are there any tips that you can give to ways people can connect with each other?
CAPE is a great way of doing that. So get yourself online, have a look at what CAPE are doing. Once you've made those connections, what I found was that further connections came. The CAPE community, not the CAPE community, the IPE community in terms of conferences is an incredible place to network. It's an incredible place to join like-minded people. So I'll do another bit of a plug here. INWE are another fantastic organisation that actually embrace interprofessional education, and their conferences are quite small. So you do get to meet different people, you do get to have those conversations. And I think spending time in that sphere where you're not thinking about lots of other things at the same time can be really freeing, and it can give you that impotence to go off and to maybe start pushing the boundaries for yourself, start saying, well, actually, we should be doing this, or wouldn't it be nice if we did this? I'm a great believer in, doing what you need and asking for forgiveness afterwards. So, I quite often will go off-piste and then go, oh, I didn't realize we weren't supposed to do that. But once you've made those connections, you can build those relationships. I've got a colleague who works literally down the road. It's a stone's throw in a different HEI, and that HEI has dietetics and speech and language therapists. We don't have them at Cardiff University, but for our radiotherapy and oncology students, they are key, particularly in head and neck cancer. And up until 2022, I've never been able to pull the two groups together or the three groups together. It's always been, no, we don't talk outside our institution. We just need to play inside. And suddenly HEIW said, well, you should be making connections with other institutions. And both myself and Dr. Amanda, her name Squire, we kind of looked at each other and went, we can do this now. And so we've developed our own kind of interprofessional activities between the dietitians and our radiography, our therapeutic radiography students. So it's about, reaching out. Just the networks are maybe not obvious to start with, but once you've found them, they are incredible.
Yes, and we'll put links to them in the show notes. But although CAPE, so the Centre for the Advancement of Interprofessional Education in the UK, it's UK based. It's open to anyone internationally, and INWE is free membership, and they're an international organization as well. And they hold a conference every year. And like you said, I mean, that was the three of us came together and kind of brainstormed this activity that we did most recently. So
yeah.
So Emma, you've talked about the theory practice gap and the need to help current practitioners and the idea of, especially in Wales, as these cohorts graduate with all this IPE, how that's going to change. But for right now, how can we prepare our students to not just encounter and recognize, but to kind of manage that theory practice gap that you're right, they're going to encounter it. I hear it from our students. I know that Suzy does as well. How can we get those students ready to manage that?
So we do a lot of work with our students around, so what is this going to look like in practice? How can you make the most of the opportunities that you might see in practice that might not actually be offered to you? So for example, we talk a lot about if you see physio students or OT students on the ward, go and have a chat to them. Make that link, go, what are you doing today? Can I have a look at what you're doing with this student or with that student? So they're almost bridging the gap for themselves, because I think until we can get a structure in place so that we can start to build our clinical educators into the same mindset, it's very, that gap becomes very, very obvious. And the further down their healthcare kind of program they go, the more resistance we see from the student body in engaging with IPE, because that's not how it works in practice. So we're starting to, as I've said, getting them to build those things for themselves. We drop little things. So I'm a member of the HEI priority group, again, that looks at how we build these networks. What can we do? So we are constantly dropping things in, like, think about how you might build the experience for them. So you've placed an ODP student, and a radiography student, a nursing student in a theatre setting. That in itself doesn't make IPE. How can you build that into an authentic? So can you take them away for an hour afterwards and ask them what they were all doing? Ask them why they didn't, move around and see what each of them were doing, but actually build that authentic kind of thing that says, so now you know what X was doing in this situation. Do you want to go and spend more time in that place so that you can find out a little bit more about this? So it's about, slowly building those networks and those bridges, even in a placement setting. The opportunities are there. I think, we do see people working together all the time, but it's about how do we make that a more collaborative approach. And when I've done things now with our guys where at the end of an IPE session, I go, look, if all you've learned today is that X next sat next to you is an OT. Swap telephone numbers, swap your email addresses, have that conversation. So if you are out on placement together, perhaps you can do something together while you're out on placement. And so it's embedding from our kind of student level, whilst we slowly work around building the experience of our clinical educators in this field as well.
Thank you. So you've done a lot. I really thank you for sharing you've had today. So what's next on your radar? Like for your next exciting IPE thing that you're doing or developing or
So we are currently looking at the potential to bring All Together Better Health. That's a global conference. So we're looking at how we might be able to bring that to Wales sometime in the near future. And what that might look like. And actually, so exciting to get that IPE community here in Wales as well. I think we're here in Wales, we're on a cusp at the moment. We're in a unique position. I think certainly within the UK, but possibly worldwide, in that we have mandated IPE within our programs, and therefore, this is the right point in time. So, so I'm working with a couple of companies that are working to bring that conference here to Wales at the moment. Might not be for a few years, but we are looking at how we might be able to facilitate that.
So exciting, though.
Exciting.
And I expect to see you both here.
Absolutely, I will be there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hike for me, but I would love to come. That sounds wonderful. So, Emma, those are that's the end of our sort of formal IPE specific questions. But we've been doing this thing with our guests based on a TV show called Inside the Actor Studio, and it's a list of questions kind of referred to the pivot questions. And we've grabbed some of those and we've written some of our own. And so, yeah, these are kind of fun questions, but they've been interesting, I think, so far on our guests' answers. So, what is one thing about your own healthcare profession that you wish other team members knew? What's one thing?
It's sort of two things, but I'm going to roll it into one. So
you can have two. You can have
two. I'd kind of like other team members to know that therapeutic radiographers exist, that we are not nurses and we are not diagnostic radiographers. We're actually a profession in our own right. So that would be a nice thing for our team members to know. Yeah.
So could you, what's your one sentence description of the work that you do?
So a therapeutic radiographer delivers high energy X-ray beams to a defined target volume, always normally cancer, to help eliminate tumor cells within a body. We are unique in that we are the only profession, certainly here in the UK, who has the mandate by law, A, to call ourselves therapeutic radiographers, and B, to be the ones that press that button that delivers that X-ray. So a diagnostic radiographer can take X-rays in a similar sort of way, but they do not have that mandate to be able to deliver a cancer treatment.
Right.
All right, mine's a bit lighter. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite medical word, and what is it?
This is a really weird one, so I am going to apologise for this one. So I really like the word orchidectomy, because when you write in an exam question, what does the term orchidectomy mean? The wide and varied answers that you get can keep you going in the darkest of moments. I think my favourite would be removal of the orc. And I'm going, I didn't know we had one.
This is very Lord of the Rings, isn't it?
Yeah. Is this about flowers? I don't know. So yeah, I quite like, and I quite like to throw orchidectomy into my exam questions just to make my day, really make me smile.
Love it. What is a profession other than your own that you would like to attempt?
I always refer to myself as a failed physio. So my first choice was physiotherapy, and I didn't get my A-level grades to be a physiotherapist. And somebody said, oh, well, you can come along and have a look at radiation therapy. Do you want to do that? And I thought, yeah, okay. Not having a clue what radiographer's done, but it had the term therapy in it, so it was okay. So yeah, I'd like to have a go at physio. I'm beginning to think I would be rubbish at it, but I wouldn't mind giving it a go. To be fair,
yeah.
I do love being a radiographer. I'm really pleased that I didn't get my physio grades. But yeah.
Like on the flip side of that, is there one that you would not want to do if you're like, that is just not for me?
I don't think that I would. Well, there's a few actually. I don't think I could do nursing purely because I don't think I could keep my face straight enough when things are not going well and everybody's picking on the nurses. Um, you know, my mouth might be shut, but my face is telling you exactly what I'm thinking. And I think nursing gets such a bad rap. When anything goes wrong, it's usually the nurses that get the blame in the media. Yeah, so I don't think nursing was for me, but I also don't think that I would have been able to do something like ophthalmology either. I don't do eyes.
Yeah. What is a sound or a noise that you love?
I thought really long and hard about this question, and I did think, I find myself making kind of a lot more noises than I ever used to because I find myself being tongue-tied a lot and my brain is working and my mouth just isn't keeping up. But one of the sounds that I really love, and it started during COVID, was I love to hear the sound of the birds. I'm now an avid bird feeder in my garden, and just to be able to hear the complete catastrophe most of the time, because it really is very beautiful, but it's just a cacophony of noise, and I think that's lovely. I like to hear that.
Great. So, what is one career you imagined doing when you were a child?
When I was a child, what I really wanted to be was what they called nursery nurses at the time. So I wanted to work in a nursery with all of the babies. And I wanted to be able to cuddle babies all day, every day, because in my idealistic child world, they never cried, they never did anything, they just liked being cuddled.
Great when they're asleep, isn't it?
Wonderful. Yeah. Great when you can give them back.
So is there a book that you're currently reading or one that you would recommend to our listeners?
So I'm currently reading a book called The Lamplighter's Bookshop. And it's a little bit of a historical fiction novel, kind of romancy built in there, set in the late 1800s. Yeah, where women weren't allowed a voice, but also the main character in it. As I'm reading it, it strikes me that today we would say that she's on that autistic spectrum. So it's actually seeing the world from her perspective as well. And she likes to say things how it is, and people don't receive that very well at that point in time. So she's often perceived as being a social pariah because nobody knows what she's going to say. But actually, she's just a really lovely person who, is misunderstood. So yeah, that's the one I'm reading at the moment.
Oh, I jotted that down. What's it called again? The Lamplighter's Bookshop?
Yes, The Lamplighter's Bookshop.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to add or share with us, Emma?
Yeah, I would just like to say, if you are starting out on your IPE journey and you're looking for somebody, you're looking for that support network, please reach out. I'm sure that Anne and Suzy will be able to share details, but I'm always here to have a listen. I'm always enthusiastic about making new connections and developing new ideas around IPE. So reach out and say hi, and who knows where we can go next.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emma. We cannot really thank you enough. It's been a really lovely discussion. So really appreciate you giving your time to us.
Absolutely. I would echo that. Thanks, Emma. It was so much fun to chat. Before we sign off. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say thank you both.
Oh, it's our pleasure, really. Before we sign off, we want to remind you, whether you're a student, a practitioner, or an educator, The work that you do is important and it can be very stressful, but you're not alone. Please take care of yourself. Let's look out for each other, and we hope that you can join us again soon. Thank you for tuning in to the iSpace podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Stay tuned for our next episode.